The Trump administration is trying to rig the 2020 census. The Trump administration recently announced that they will add a question about U.S. citizenship to the 2020 census form. Now, this just sounds like one little tweak, one little question, but it's an absolutely massive deal because the census has not asked this question about U.S. citizenship since 1950. So there's a ton of fear right now that immigrants will be afraid to respond to the 2020 census because of this question about U.S. citizenship, because of the Trump administration's immigration policies. And the census itself will be unfair and inaccurate as a result. The census is so important because it forms the basis for basically everything America does. The census determines how over $675 billion in federal funding is allocated to states and localities for things like roads and schools and hospitals and healthcare. I mean, literally everything we do in America is determined by census funding. It forms the basis for how states draw their voting districts. It forms the basis for how many congressional seats and electoral votes states receive. It forms the basis for the data that every institution in America uses. So the census forms the basis for the core infrastructure of our democracy. And if the census is rigged, if the census is manipulated, then our entire democracy is rigged as a result. So I was recently out in California in the Central Valley, which is one of the hardest places in the country to count accurately. And I asked Latino immigrants, would you respond to the 2020 census if it included a question about U.S. citizenship? And they all told me no. No one's going to voluntarily give the Trump administration their immigration status, given the incredible climate of fear that we're seeing in the country. You have ICE doing raids all across the country. You have Trump demonizing immigrants. And now they're turning around saying, give us your immigration status, give us your citizenship status on the census form. That's crazy in this day and age. What the Trump administration is trying to do by adding this citizenship question is to weaponize voter suppression and weaponize nativist resentment and make it a long-term strategy of the Republican Party to hold power. So they don't just want to depress responses from immigrants so that those areas get less money, less resources. They want, in the grand scheme of things, to only count citizens for purposes of redistricting and representation. And what Republicans are trying to do is, in the face of massive demographic change, where white people are shrinking as a percentage of the population, will eventually become the minority, they want to lock in a very white, very conservative Republican Party in the face of massive demographic change, and they're trying to rig the 2020 census to accomplish that goal for as long as possible.